So I just got my FOIA response as I requested it from as requested from the Rockford Police Department. Um, when I speak, when I spoke, I should say, to the police, I'm trying to reiterate every incident that led up to the crime, and because it is illogical for somebody to commit a crime, the things they inside their head and the things they do, it is very complicated to explain in a small window of time. And so when I'm communicating to the Rockford Police, it's not only what I say, but it's also what the other person says, um, and so what I'm trying to do is get the truth out, and I'm trying to explain that these incidences occurred in order, and it led up to the incident, and a lot of it is forgotten when I'm communicating the incidences in order, and it's difficult, like in the court, when a lawyer has to sit there and just go over the problem time and time again, and it's difficult to compel a a, a audience an audience on a crime that has occurred when there are so many elements to that crime, and I can, and then the defendant or the opposing party, what they say comes into account, and when they interpret their reality and what they perceive completely incorrectly, then it's as if, like, and it goes into document. It's 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 as if it actually, what they how they perceived reality and how they interpreted what the occurrence is almost the truth, especially when they are more powerful than the opposing party. It's see what I'm trying to say is that these elements are so dynamic. It's difficult to explain, and I'm telling the police in real time that these occurrences that led up are very bad, and they are lying, and they're not able to tell you the truth because of their incompetence. And then the police, though what they say, what the opposing party may say is maybe may like logical and grammatically correct and linguistically correct, it's still incorrect. And so when they file the police report, it's the police report is done incorrectly. Now and so, meaning that what was said is not is not interpreted correctly. Um, so I can either type out in a linear fashion, like, what exactly happened, because saying it is just, it's too much information. It's too many, like, gigabytes of information compiled into like one scene. And I can do that, but when you're suffering from not being able to, like, sit for hours and break it down, it's almost difficult to defend, and you have to know, like, I'm not trying to stutter, but it but I'm trying to say this nicely, and it's so difficult. Um, if you can, a picture says 1,000 words. A scene in a movie, in over 2 seconds, you can say 1,000 things about it, and you can explain why the scene occurred the way it did, but it takes a lot of time. And when you're trying to fight for yourself, you can't you cannot. It is very difficult to fight for yourself and to disprove a liar and an abuser. And it's almost it's easy it's easier to just believe a person than it is to actually interpret, which is not good. It's not good just to put faith in somebody without evidence. But there's so much incorrect information on the police report that it's there's a lot of incorrect information on the police report that holding it up in the court as factual is almost, if you're a good lawyer, which I if I was a lawyer, I would say this is not a this inform if I was a lawyer and knew every detail, I would argue that even the FOIA, the police report, is inaccurate, and that has hurt me in the past. This newest police report has somewhat helped my case, but yet it's still not. It still hasn't. It still wasn't. Isn't enough for a conviction. I asked the police department if I can go in and just like break it down for you, and they would not let me do that. And so I think what we're seeing here is the reality of being falsely arrested when somebody is, which did happen to me, when somebody is able to lie and believe in their lie and believe in their self, and there is an element of love, like with a family member, where you really just want people to care for each other. Well, I get to say where I want people to care for each other, and and explaining how you can be, it causes the rationale to kind of go on a tangent, because when you tell somebody one thing that you care, when you tell somebody you care, and then you hurt them, and then you tell them you care, and then you hurt them, and then you lie, it causes the person who's being hurt to. That's literally, if it's a tangent. If you graph it, that would be the definition of a tangent. It's literally just there's the asymptotes at, like, oh my gosh. If you graph it, it's literally a tangent because there is no connection between the statements itself. And so when you're trying to make the connection, you're trying to the missing piece. It's so dynamic and it's so intricate that it's not impossible to prove. It's advanced mathematics, but a police officer is not going to sit here and say, well, like, it's not going to think like a mathematician and try to connect the dots that way. You have to be a specialist to do that, or you just have to be accustomed to hearing it for so long. And we're talking about the worst circumstances. You have to be a professional and have heard the worst circumstances for so long. You can see through the trauma and the suffering, and the person not being able to make sense of the person as a victim, be able to make sense of the other party. And so all this that I'm talking about is simply emotion, and so I'll stop right there. And so if I was a horrible person, I would just shove I would just like force the interpretation to be understood. But I'm not going to force information upon somebody, and so it's difficult to fight for myself. But if you were to, and so that's just, it's difficult to relay the information to the receiver, when we think that people are good, or I think people are good, and so I have a difficulty when I get hurt, and to defend myself, because I don't. The solution was for it to never happen. It's difficult for me to explain why I can't make that connection sometimes, without using mathematical terms. And but this is and it's difficult for me to argue to a police officer or whoever, because I'm at the fear. Well, even if there's not fear of being arrested, it's still, we're talking about pressure, and we're talking about a lot of information being received in a small period of time, which can be misconstrued. And these connections, these things I'm saying are very difficult to connect, and sometimes they don't make sense. But it's because of the amount of gigabytes that the amount of data that I am communicating. Like I'm stringing together a timeline, and I'm having to do it in a very short period of time, and I'm just trying to break it down, and trying to, I guess, disprove the other person, and prove my innocence. And I'm trying to, like, and I'm providing a lot of that information. But it was that I was assaulted, I was threatened, and this happened daily. My grandmother was assaulted and threatened. This happened daily. And um, that my belongings were taken from me. Like, I should just be able to say that I was assaulted, I was threatened daily. My grandmother was assaulted and threatened daily. My belongings were taken. And then the person just obviously would be arrested. But that is not enough to confirm somebody's guilty. Me just saying it is not enough to confirm somebody is guilty. And yet, so I have to, like, string back the entire history of what happened. And because what happened? Well, they're horrible people, and I have to prove that they're horrible people. And so it's like, for some reason, people see an individual as a good person when they're not. For some reason, people, make some people make the wrong people. How would I say it? People. I said it correctly. But it's funny because you can. It's not funny. It's horrible because you can see somebody and think you know them, and you don't know them. And when I have a family member who is abusive, and they violate women's rights, and they hurt women, and then their offspring, their son, also does the same thing. And they believe they think it's okay to hurt women, is what it is. When they think it's okay, the police hear their story. They're like, yeah, it's not that bad. I mean, you're controlling your wife. That's how they did it in 1950. Like, the woman stayed home and cooked meals, and that was how it was. Like, this idea of freedom and your own liberty is still mistaken, and it's so difficult to explain in a small window of time. And I will get better at explaining these things quickly and more methodically. But once again, it doesn't solve the problem of comprehension. It's so much information that you must break it down in many ways for an entire audience to grasp the elements that occur. So so my argument then is that it doesn't matter how good you are at explaining what happened, people are not going to get it right away. And everybody will agree on that statement. And I'm trying to assert that you should not be able to convict somebody falsely because of because and convict them falsely and not and before that conviction not allow them to explain as many times as possible what happened. And unfortunately, that's just not how our courts operate. You are given a limited amount of time to testify, and and the information that's given is completely controlled by the by cross examination or your own testimony. And up until that point of trial, you're not, depending on the severity of the crime or the amount of income you have, you might not be able to get that information out whatsoever. And once again, that information that's being given is still the information that's given on paper is still minute. When I went to college, we had to do like 15 pages. We had to write out 15 pages because 15 pages was like the minimum for getting any kind of understanding of a scientific problem. So this is, and then if you look at when you look at publishers, when you look at somebody who's an author, like they're publishing an entire book to break it down. And the idea in a book is usually, if it's a good book, is one idea, and it takes a long time to explain. But I am able to at least explain that the evidence that is being submitted for a crime is limited, and it's not, and how we handle evidence is very much it's very much a limited amount, and you can manipulate that evidence to your benefit, to your advantage, and for the wrong reason. I just spent 17 minutes and 50 seconds on explaining why, and it may be enough to interpret why, but I did not prove or disprove any violent action, any crime. I just sat here for 18 minutes to explain why I should be innocent, but without proving, not giving any evidence of why, because it takes that long to hone in on the subject matter. So I guess what I want to say is that this video should be used as a part of my I guess part of my restitution, and if you're a professional, you know what I'm talking about. But maybe as a professional, you could at least fight on the behalf of somebody who was a victim, and not just let it go. There's detectives who might not even have this broad understanding that I am communicating, and hopefully they, in the future, will be forced to, I guess, to sit there and acknowledge or provide a safe way to a person so they can get all the information out. I'm not sure why I couldn't speak to a detective. I'm not sure what the issue was, but that's a key. That is key to solving a crime, is speaking to a detective and providing the information. And it's just because we're talking about this whole thing is insensible. It's just completely insensible why somebody would hurt somebody, and then say they like that person, and then say then lie to the police, tell the police the one side of it, and just to prevent them from being implicated in anything. And it's just like if you can't, officers should be able to see like those elements when they're communicating, when they're dispatched and communicating during the dispute, and it's just like they're not doing that, and I don't know, it's it should be.